Welcome back to another episode of the Wealth Building for Dummies podcast. My name is Kyle Demian, and I am here with Renji Matthew as well. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about the best debt that you can have. And if you're new to our show, want to welcome you, and you might be thinking, the best debt you can have, how is any debt any good? And that is exactly what we're going to be talking about today, because there is some forms of good debt. So Renji, thanks for being here with me. And do you want to get us started? Kind of talk about what is possibly the best debt that somebody could ever have? How does that even make sense?
Yeah, and going back to that question before, is debt even a good thing? I think we covered this on a previous podcast, how there's good and bad debt, right? If you're $100,000 in credit card debt because you were using for buying shoes or clothes and stuff that you didn't really need, then that's bad debt for sure. and then we've talked about real estate, which we think is the best debt to have, especially if you have rental properties and stuff like that, because what are you doing with that? If you have renters, you're not actually paying that debt back, right? So that's, in our opinion, it is probably the best debt you can have.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, it all comes down to leverage, right? And being able to use other people's money to make money. And what's the best institution at doing this? It's banks. Banks don't open up a building or open up a store and they automatically have money that they just throw into it. No, like banks collect money from people. And let's say that you want to save your money into a bank and open up a CD, or a certificate of deposit account. Maybe they'll give you a 4% rate for your CD. And so the bank is going to take your $20,000 and they're going to give you a 4% rate of return to you. But the bank doesn't hold on to that $20,000. They turn around and give that to somebody that's looking for a car loan. And they may charge that person, let's say, a 9% interest rate on their car loan. So now the bank took your $20,000, gave it to somebody else, and they're the middleman that's keeping the 5% difference, right? This is what banks do. And it's no different when we go take out a mortgage for $100,000, to use round numbers. Let's say your monthly payment on it is $600 a month, but it cash flows for maybe $1,200 a month, right? You are borrowing someone else's money to buy an asset that produces passive cash flow. And that's why, borrowing money, using it for real estate and mortgages is probably the best debt that you can have. Now, don't get it confused with debt on your primary residence. This would be debt for, an investment property, or a property that you have somebody else living in, or maybe doing an Airbnb through, anything that allows it to produce passive cash flow and passive income, right? And the way I look at it, and Renji, correct me if I'm wrong, but like when you have debt like that, it's almost not debt. It's almost like an asset. You know what I mean? Oh, I guess it is an asset because you're borrowing money that's producing more money, right?
Yeah, it is. And like, just going back to that example of a bank, what they're doing, think about it. The example you used, Kyle, was $20,000, right? So if you gave the bank $20,000 in a CD, and they paid you, I think you said 4%, which is around like $800 or something at the end of that term, right? Because normally a CD is usually a year, sometimes 6 months. It could be a time period that they're giving you. So in that, let's say, year, they paid you $800, right? But in that same year, they lend that out to other people, or even to you, in the form of credit cards or loans or something. And credit cards can go, I've seen credit cards that go up to 30% in interest, right? But let's be conservative and go back to, I think the example you used was 9%. If they only charge you 9%, they're making what, 1,800? That's $1,000 more than you got paid by them, right? And that's just one example. And again, we were conservative in that number. Imagine a credit card where it can go 20 to 30% interest. The bank's making a lot of money on your money. So the bank, again, is taking a loan with your money and lending it out to other people. So they have good debt right there, right? That's what banks do. They're giving out more. They're it's mortgages, credit cards. All of this stuff is money that they're using your money to give it back out of people as debt. So
Yeah.
they're leveraging what we're trying to do in a whole nother level, right? They're doing it
Hmm.
masterfully. So now we need to be able to do the same thing and do it better, right?
100%. And this is something that the wealthy know and understand, whether it's due to it wasn't from formal education that they learned this, but probably from business relationships, their mentors, maybe their family, right? If their family has money. And I think that's where the difference is. I saw something today on social media that I liked and wanted to bring up. And it's how the different classes of people like spend their money. And the lower class, or how they utilize their money. The lower class spends their money. The middle class saves their money, but the upper class invests other people's money. And the unfortunate truth is that the first two groups just haven't figured out what the upper class does, how it works, and how to do it. But the thing is, like, the information is there. There's podcasts like ours amongst hundreds of thousands of others that talk about, investments and getting into assets and stuff too. So the information is there. The lower and the middle class just haven't realized that this is how the upper class builds wealth, right? And with that, I mean, that's all I got to say. We could keep this episode short and sweet. The best debt that you could probably have is mortgages that are paid by other people because they're assets. And Renji, is there anything else that you want to add for us?
Yeah, we can use a simple example of for people that are watching, to understand the numbers a little bit better too. We use the example of a bank, but let's say you had $100,000. We use that as a credit card, right? With $100,000 in debt in credit card, and let's say you are paying 15% interest, right? And then compare that to a $100,000 mortgage. If you are paying 15% in interest, the bank's making what, $15,000,
Yeah,
right? And
every year. Yeah,
now every year, yeah. So if you have a mortgage of 100,000, and let's say you charged 1,000 in rent, or not mortgage yourself, you have a renter that's paying 1,000 a month, right? They're paying you 12,000 a year, and if the mortgage is only half that, let's say it's 500, you're paying the bank 6,000 a year, and you're keeping 6,000 a year. So you profited 6,000, where you're not paying the mortgage, the renter is paying the mortgage. So it might take you 20 years or more to pay that mortgage back, but you're not paying that mortgage. The renter is. So you're profiting money. And let's say after 20 years, or however long it takes you to pay that mortgage off, once that mortgage is paid off, now that's 12,000 all to you.
all
Profit,
profit.
right?
Yeah,
And then that's another thing on top of that is that's 20 years of you or that's a couple of years of having tax advantages because you have a property to depreciate from. And let's say it takes you 20 years to pay that mortgage off. In 20 years, that house is not going to be worth 100,000 anymore. The house is going to be worth well over 200,000 probably, right? So your value on that debt had gone up. Not on the debt itself, but the property that you got with that debt has gone up a lot too. Now, if you wanted to go get a refinance or a line of credit or something, that's your money in the equity that you have in that mortgage or in that property. That it's just more value it's added to you over time. So again, more numbers to look at why that is good debt to have compared to the 100,000 in credit card debt that you can have. Hopefully that
absolutely.
helps people understand the numbers a little bit more. I don't know if I butchered the numbers there or not, but hopefully it helps.
No, yeah, absolutely. It made sense. So yeah, go get yourself some good debt. Get out of the bad debt first, then start saving up some money so you can add on some good debt, and do that by investing into assets. And you don't have to wait until you have the whole $200,000 saved up, for if you still have like an FHA loan, or you can get a conventional loan on a property that's only 3 to 5% down. Otherwise, it is typically 20% down for an investor's loan on a property, right, Renji?
Yeah, anything that's not primary, it's not a primary residence. It's
It's 20.
20% down at least, depending on the bank.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
20% of a $200,000 property would be $40,000 saved up, right? So go get yourself some of that good debt. Start reaping the benefits of having cash flow in your life. And keep in mind the passive cash flow, or the financial freedom formula, is when your passive cash flow is greater than your expenses. And most people wait until they're 65 or 70 and they've saved up $1 million to hopefully become financially free. But you could do it much, much quicker once you get into assets that are producing that passive cash flow, instead of waiting 40 years to save up some big nest egg amount, right? And you got one more thing to add?
Well, I just thought of
Yeah, yeah.
something. You had talked about the lower, middle, and upper class too. The way to get out of the lower and middle class, we were in the middle class. We were working a regular job, saving money away for retirement, stuff like that. The way to get out of that and getting into the good, like Kyle said, what the upper class do is they use their money to make them more money, and then they use other people's money to make them money also. That's kind of what we did. We used our money that we had to invest into real estate, and we used the bank's money to invest into real estate to make passive income. So to get out of the middle class area, to get into the upper class, we're not upper class by any means by our income, but we're trying to copy what the upper class do so that we don't stay in the middle class. And eventually, like Kyle said, passive income above expenses, you're financially free. That's financial freedom formula. Now to build wealth, you just copy that. You just multiply that as many times as you want, and that's what we're doing. We've copied that, and to make it to that part. Now we just have to keep multiplying it so we can build wealth. Not to say that we're trying to get to the upper class. We're just saying you want to copy what the upper class is doing so that you can be rich or you can build wealth. I just wanted to add that because I thought about that while you were talking about that.
No, that's good. Yeah, because it creates, you do want to, once you get your first property or asset, then you want to apply the multiplication effect. How quickly can you get your next one? And then your next one, your next one. And then sooner or later, you can actually borrow from the first one if you've built up equity, and you can buy your seventh one. So all of this wealth building starts to compound once you get started. And that's the first step, is always just to get started, right? And to dive into it. It's going to be uncomfortable. You're not going to know what you're doing. Welcome to welcome to leveling up in life, because that's what always happens. It's always uncomfortable. It's always going to be uncomfortable, but you've got to just take the action, take the step. If you have a mentor, if you don't have one, maybe find one and help them, maybe with getting started. Then once from there, you've learned by yourself, then you can quickly scale and continue to grow wealth. So awesome. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure to like and subscribe and drop your comments below. What do you think about good debt versus bad debt? Do you think that all debt is bad? Or do you believe with what we say, where the best debt and good debt is having mortgages that are paid by other people, because now it's producing cash flow, right? Let us know in the chat below, and we'll see you guys on the next episode. Take care.